If you want shoulders that make you look wider, more athletic, and completely different in a t-shirt, and you have been doing lateral raises and overhead presses for months with almost nothing to show for it, then the next 6 minutes are going to completely change how you train your shoulders, because the problem is not your genetics, it is not your frequency, and it is almost certainly not your effort. It is that you are making 3 or 4 specific biomechanical and psychological errors that are collectively ensuring your deltoids receive the minimum possible stimulus every single session, while you believe you are training them hard. And fixing these errors starting at your very next workout will produce more shoulder growth in the next 8 weeks than you have seen in the past 6 months. The first thing you need to understand is the anatomy of the deltoid, because without this knowledge, every exercise choice and technique decision you make will be based on guesswork. Your shoulder is not one muscle, it is 3 distinct heads that are each activated by completely different movement patterns. The anterior deltoid at the front, which handles forward elevation of the arm and is the primary mover in overhead pressing and front raises. The lateral deltoid in the middle, which is responsible for arm abduction, raising your arm out to the side, and is the head most responsible for creating the wide capped shoulder appearance that makes your waist look smaller and your frame look broader, and the posterior deltoid at the rear, which handles horizontal extension and external rotation and is the most commonly neglected head in almost every gym goer's program, despite being critical for shoulder health, posture, and the 3-dimensional roundness of a fully developed shoulder. And the single most important anatomical fact you need to absorb right now is that the lateral deltoid, the head you most want to develop for width, gets almost zero stimulus from overhead pressing, which means if your shoulder training is built around the overhead press and a few sets of lateral raises, you are primarily developing the anterior deltoid, which is already heavily recruited during all your chest pressing, and you are barely touching the muscle head responsible for the visual outcome you actually want. The second mistake is how you perform lateral raises, because lateral raises are simultaneously the most important shoulder exercise for building width and the most universally butchered exercise in the gym, and the errors compound on each other in a way that can reduce your lateral deltoid activation by 40 to 50% compared to the correctly performed version. Most people perform lateral raises by picking up dumbbells and swinging them upward with a combination of momentum, traps, and upper back, with their thumbs higher than their pinkies throughout the movement. This hand position, where the palm faces down or the thumb leads, internally rotates the humerus and moves the lateral deltoid into a mechanically disadvantaged position where it cannot produce maximum force, while simultaneously shifting the load toward the supraspinatus tendon of the rotator cuff, which is exactly where you don't want compressive load. Research on deltoid activation during lateral raises, including EMG studies from the Journal of Electromyography and Kinesiology, shows that slight external rotation during the raise, achieved by tilting the pinky slightly higher than the thumb, as if you were pouring water out of a jug, significantly increases lateral deltoid activation while reducing rotator cuff impingement risk, and additionally, keeping a very slight bend in the elbow and initiating the movement from the elbow rather than the hand dramatically reduces the tendency to use wrist and forearm momentum to swing the weight up, keeping the tension where it belongs, which is in the lateral deltoid, throughout the entire range of motion. The third mistake is the weight you are using, and this is where exercise psychology collides with biomechanics in a way that is costing you enormous amounts of lateral deltoid development. Lateral raises are an isolation exercise for a relatively small muscle, and they need to be performed with weights light enough to allow strict, controlled, full range of motion with a genuine 2 to 3 second eccentric on the way down. Yet the ego-driven tendency in the gym is to grab the heaviest dumbbells possible and perform a movement that can only generously be described as a lateral raise, with the traps doing most of the lifting, the lower back swinging for momentum, and the lateral deltoid contributing maybe 30% of the force production. Drop to a weight that allows you to raise your arms with complete control to parallel with the floor. Not above parallel, because above parallel, the traps take over completely. Pause for 1 second at the top where the lateral deltoid is at peak contraction, and take 3 full seconds to lower the weight back to the starting position, because the eccentric phase of lateral raises is where a disproportionate amount of the hypertrophic stimulus is generated, according to research, on eccentric loading and muscle damage. And most people lower the weight in half a second through gravity alone, wasting the most valuable half of every single rep. The fourth mistake is the complete neglect of the posterior deltoid, and this is both a training error and a psychological one rooted in the fact that you cannot see your rear delts in the mirror while you train, and humans systematically underinvest in developing muscles they cannot observe during training. This is documented in exercise psychology research as a version of the visibility bias, where training decisions are unconsciously driven by visual feedback during the session rather than by anatomical completeness, producing the classic result of well-developed front and side delts with flat, underdeveloped rear delts that not only look incomplete from behind, but actively destabilize the shoulder joint by creating an anterior dominant muscle imbalance that pulls the humeral head forward in the socket, increasing impingement risk and reducing the amount of load your shoulder can safely handle in pressing movements. Meaning neglecting your rear delts is not just aesthetically limiting, it is mechanically making every other upper body exercise you do less safe and less effective. Face pulls, rear delt flies performed with your chest on an incline bench to eliminate lower back involvement, and band pull-aparts are the 3 most effective posterior deltoid exercises, and at least one of them should appear in every shoulder training session you do. The complete framework for building bigger shoulders fast is this: train your shoulders twice per week, because the deltoids are a relatively small muscle group that recovers quickly and responds well to higher frequency. Start each session with overhead pressing for anterior deltoid and overall mass and strength development, but treat it as a complement to your lateral work rather than the centerpiece. Perform 4 to 5 sets of strict lateral raises with the pinky up external rotation, a 3-second eccentric, and a weight light enough to maintain perfect form. Because research on effective reps and proximity to failure shows that lateral raises taken close to failure with strict form in the 15 to 25 rep range produce optimal lateral head hypertrophy. Finish every session with 3 sets of rear delt work to build the posterior head and protect your shoulder joint. Redirect your mental attention during every exercise from moving the weight to feeling the specific deltoid head you are targeting contract and stretch, because internal attentional focus research consistently shows 18 to 23% greater muscle activation when subjects consciously focus on the target muscle versus focusing on the movement itself. And understand with complete clarity that shoulder width is built almost entirely by the lateral deltoid. The lateral deltoid is built by strict lateral raises and nothing else. And strict lateral raises require you to completely abandon your ego at the dumbbell rack. Do that consistently for 8 weeks, and the shoulders you have been trying to build for the past year will finally start to appear.